Gee golly, shoot dang, check out this big old western red cedar. Pretty straight, probably some pretty sound wood in there, pretty good. Now, I gotta be really real with you guys and level with you about something. Logging always has been, and always will be an important part of the culture here in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, it's what built these towns, what built our cities, it's what our houses are made of. Like, we're always going to need logging, right? And on a personal level, I have a family history with logging. My great-grandpa was one of the first timber cruisers to go back through Western Oregon back in the day. Absolute badass. He spent weeks at a time out living in the bush, hunting when he ate, sleeping under a lean-to tent. And nowadays, if you go back to those same hillsides that he cruised, what once was rich, vast forests of Douglas firs and hemlocks is now just like a bunch of swaths of deciduous trees because we didn't know what we were doing back then. We didn't know how to manage forests. And today, we still think that we've gotten better through, replanting efforts and rigorous management plans that claim to be thinking of the future when cutting down a 1,000-year-old forest and replacing it with a 70-year crop. But I still remember in the 90s when the mill at the local town that I grew up skiing in shut down, when the mill in the town next to that shut down, the mill at the town next to that, until now, there's only one mill operating at a fraction of the capacity in an area that used to house, 12 different mills. It's nuts. I mean, even here in BC, since 2010, we've lost nearly 50,000 jobs in the logging industry alone, which is pretty nuts, but that boom and bust cycle is commonplace. It makes it really difficult for people to survive, to have sort of steady incomes, to have the stability to raise a family, have kids, and live quality lives. But every time this whole discussion comes about of saving and protecting forests from logging, it often gets pitted as an issue of environmentalists versus loggers and their families, which just simply isn't the case. I mean, the sad reality of it is that we've lost more jobs in logging over the past few decades to technological advances like feller bunchers and shipping raw logs overseas than we have to any environmental regulations or laws that have come about. If anything, these environmental regulations and laws have helped create more jobs and stability by expanding the roster of people that need to be involved, from tree planters in the summertime to ecologists who now, need to be involved every step of the way. So even if the industry is slumping, right, we're still going to need wood for construction, for furniture, for fuel. So if we can't figure out a way to create sustainable jobs and economy, what sort of future is in store for us? At the same time, the logging industry has been going through this economic boom and bust cycle that makes it really difficult to survive. Our forests have been doing the exact same thing ecologically. I mean, just like my great-grandpa walked through the woods back in the day thinking he knew what he was doing with forest management, we still think and act as if we know what we're doing, but we're learning day by day that we have no idea, and we're actually kind of wrecking things. You see, in an old-growth forest, the species diversity of different trees at different ages helps create a mosaic that allows for life to thrive and performs all sorts of ecological functions. And we lose those functions when we clear cut these forests and replace them with what is often a very tightly packed monoculture of genetically modified trees living in soil that's sprayed with chemical herbicide to keep competitive understory from coming up. Like, that's not an understatement. This is actively happening in the world today. So we take these ecosystems that have developed for thousands of years, cut them all down, and replace them with crop plantation, no different than a corn crop, to be cut down every 70 years. I mean, these trees are barely toddlers by the time we cut them down again and have no time to perform any of the ecological functions that those forest ecosystems have evolved to do. So beyond the scenic beauty of an old-growth forest, the ecological functions that they perform are absolutely pivotal to having a stable environment, which we're slowly starting to destroy, like literally. And this is leading to some of the largest continental-sized threats that we're facing today. Everything from the spread of the mountain pine beetle, which killed off vast swaths of forest in the interior, to the wild and crazy, uncontrollable fire seasons that we're having every summer, the silting up of dams, the poor river quality, which is killing off populations of salmon, all sorts of erosion, flooding, landslides that are happening because there's no roots to hold the soil together. Like, these are all direct causes and symptoms of having poorly managed forests, yet nobody's talking about this and nobody's taking responsibility for it. Without these forests to regulate water flow, purify our air, stabilize our soil, or become stands of fire-resistant forests and, an era of climate change, let alone sequester all the carbon from the atmosphere that we're going to need to do, we need to really start considering what kind of world we're going to leave behind for our kids. We all want a better future, more sustainability, more jobs, more stability, and an economy that facilitates ecological functions that we all need to survive. Like, we all want the same things. But how do we achieve that, right? The North American market for wood has been, vastly oversaturated by the amount of virgin wood that existed here on the continent. And quite frankly, we've never paid the true value of the wood because we've always gotten it for cheaper because of the seemingly endless supply of it, right? That's driven market prices down. So now that there's less money flowing into the industry overall, and it's prevented people from seeking alternatives because of the seemingly high costs associated with that, right? But once all the old growth forest is gone, the logging industry is going to crash yet again because it's now dependent on logging old growth. And we're just going to be left with a larger environmental issue that we now need to solve without an economy to do so. all old growth logging does is push off the inevitable reality that we're eventually someday going to have to figure out a way how to sustainably manage the second and third growth forests that exist all over the country and the continent, not only economically, but ecologically. We need to create a system that gives back not only to the people on the ground, but the communities that depend on these resources so that they can manage them for the longevity and benefit of everybody. Now, this whole entire narrative of environmentalists versus loggers is a completely fabricated, distractionary tactic used by the people up top who are just trying to use the system to make a buck. This is the government officials and lobbyists who benefit and get paid from massive timber sales, and the logging corporations that destroy these lands with no responsibility for fixing it. It's the Jones brothers from Teal Jones trying to log the last of the old growth forests on Vancouver Island to pad their wallets before retirement, or the Weyerhausers who buy out competition and monopolize the market, destroy the forest, and then make buku dollars off land deals, off real estate deals with that same land. These folks don't actually care about the people on the ground or in the woods, nor do they care about the lands that they operate on and the communities that depend on them, which is exactly why we need whole industry reform that actually looks out for the future health, wealth, and benefit of both the economic and ecological systems in the province. This isn't loggers versus environmentalists, it's the people versus systemic wealth and power. It's holding our elected officials and corporations responsible for their myopic actions. It's changing the status quo for a better tomorrow. So what the heck do we do, huh? Solutions are usually pretty good. Well, the first thing we can do is ending all ancient forest logging immediately, permanently, to preserve their biodiversity and ecological functions well into the future. The second step is to stop all raw log exports that are going to foreign countries to be milled elsewhere. I mean, we're basically just throwing local jobs and economy out the window, just giving it away. We need to stop that. We then need to retrofit the existing mills throughout the province through benefits and subsidies so that they can handle smaller second and third growth logs, which is going to create more local milling opportunities, more jobs, and stable economy in these small communities. Then, working with these local communities and indigenous nations, we need to dismantle the monopoly of big ticket logging corporations and instead create smaller woodlots that are managed locally for the long-term benefit of these communities and the environment. Through extremely selective harvesting methods and long-term management plans, we can slowly work to build old growth characteristics back into the second and third growth forests that we have in order to increase biodiversity and resilience to fire, disease, and erosion while mitigating the effects of climate change. It's a model that's been proven to work not only in sustaining healthy, diverse forest ecosystems, but also create more jobs and economic gain over the long term. Through only taking from these forests what we need one bit at a time, we can create a model that operates on a truly sustainable yield, an honorable harvest that not only seeks to benefit these forests and the ecological stability of our future, but also the economies of today and tomorrow so that everyone and everything in society can benefit, not just those at the top. I know it sounds like a crazy idea because it looks a lot different from the way we've been doing things, but let's be honest, the way we've been doing things hasn't really been working. So what's the harm in trying something new? You know, it's crazy, but it all starts with a phone call, a letter, a rally, a blockade. We all need to stand together to call on John Horgan, the BC NDP, to take action on these dwindling resources today so that we can create a future worth living in tomorrow.